Greetings, everyone. Welcome to our exclusive Global Leading Voices webinar campaign. We are delighted to have you join us here today. Please be informed that if you have any questions during the presentation, you may type them into the question box in your control panel. The presenter will answer your questions at the end of the presentation accordingly. Now, without further ado, we will turn the time over to our presenter, who will begin shortly.
Good morning. I'm Dan Lorman. I am the Chief Strategist and Chief Security Officer with Security Mentor Incorporated, and I'd like to welcome you to our PECB webinar. The title of this morning's webinar, and this morning East Coast time in the USA, that is Top 20 Predictions, Top 2020 Security Predictions, Cybersecurity Threats, Trends, and CCPA Regulation. And I'm joined today by really a superstar cast. I'm really excited that I have Adam Ford. He's the CISO for Illinois, state of Illinois government, and also Vinod Brahmapuram, who is the CISO for the state of Washington. I'll let them introduce themselves in a moment, but just want to let you know that this morning we are a global webcast. I'm actually coming to you from Michigan, cold Michigan. We were just talking about that a few minutes ago. Obviously, Adam's in Chicago, and Vinod is in the state of Washington up in Pacific time. So, we have people listening all over the world. We're glad you joined us this morning. I'm just going to allow Adam to introduce, tell us a little bit about his background, and then Vinod, and then we're going to dive into the agenda. We certainly want to hear your questions, so I want you to know that at the end of this presentation, there will be about hopefully 10 to 12 minutes for some Q&A and some discussion with the live audience. So, Adam, welcome. Thank you for being with us. Can you tell us about your background?
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Adam Ford. As Dan mentioned, I'm the CISO for the state of Illinois, the great state of Illinois. And I've been with the state of Illinois and in information security for quite a while now. I came to information security from a networking side. So I think it feels like people come into the CISO role from two different sides. Maybe you come from the policy side or you come from the tech side, and then you have to learn the other side. So I've been spending the last couple of years really focusing on the policy and increasing my policy game. In addition to overseeing state information security stuff, I do quite a lot of stuff with state of Illinois elections, anything, and we'll talk about it later, but anything in stateside right now involves a lot of partnerships with local government, so I do a lot of that stuff as well.
Great. Well, thank you so much for being here. I'm really looking forward to your session. We're going to tell us more about what's going on in the state of Illinois. Vinod, welcome, and tell us about your background.
Thank you, Dan. Good morning, everybody. My name is Vinod Brahmapuram. I am the State Chief Information Security Officer for the state of Washington. I've been in this role for now, I would say this is my 4th month, so I'm a little bit new for the state of Washington, but not new to government. I've been in the public sector space now close to 20 years, served in 2 other states before coming to Washington. I was the Deputy Chief Information Security Officer for the state of South Carolina, and served as the Chief Information Security Officer for Health and Human Services in New Hampshire before I left New Hampshire. So 3 states, served in 3 different states. I'm a public servant, and I'm looking forward to serving the remaining 47 states in the country.
That's great. Thank you. Well, listen, I couldn't ask for 2 better people. You guys are both rock stars, very smart, very, very smart people, and we're really fortunate to have you on this morning. I just want to say also, for those who don't know my background, I started the National Security Agency in Washington. I was in England with Lockheed and Mantech for 7 years in the 90s, and then 17 years in Michigan government, and a lot of different roles as Chief Information Security Officer, Chief Technology Officer, and Chief Security Officer in Michigan. Served on a lot of National Association of State CIO committees and Homeland Security committees in Washington, and worked with the White House and others on public policy around cybersecurity. So really excited about this morning's agenda. We're going to dive in. So what are we going to talk about? We want to start off with just some high-level predictions, a little bit of background on what is hot right now, really looking at what the security vendors are thinking regarding 2020. Take you back just for a couple quick slides on kind of where we've been in 18 and 19, and then get some reaction from our 2 expert CISOs. Then we're going to hear more specifically about their priorities and projects that are kind of top of the priority list within the state of Washington and the state of Illinois. We're gonna cover them. Each of our CISOs are gonna take about 7 or 8 minutes and walk through some of their top projects. Then near the end, we're going to have a panel discussion on privacy actions, specifically CCPA implementation nationwide, what they're seeing in their states. Also, there's some new legislation I know in the state of Washington, and we're going to talk about some other privacy legislation. And then we're going to go live to the audience. We're going to take some of your questions. You can write them into the box, and basically we're going to answer as many of those questions as we possibly can. So definitely going to want to hear from you and hear what your questions are for our expert CISOs. Well, taking it back just a few years, some of you may know we've done this the last 3 years now. It's becoming kind of an annual tradition. We've had CISOs from Delaware, from Nebraska, from Missouri, from North Carolina. Now we have Illinois, state of Washington. We looked in the past few years, and we look back at 2018. The big focus was a year when privacy really took center stage with GDPR. A lot of the Facebook issues we were facing. 2018 was a year that privacy got real, and it's going to get even more real in 2020. I think we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But certainly 2018, the code word was really privacy. Now heading into 2019, there was a lot of predictions around more major data breaches, and certainly that came true, because last year we saw, by a number of different standards, maybe the highest number of records ever breached in any one year. Bad actors are still in the lead by a substantial margin. IoT really starting to take off, but not being so smart. The need for smart everything. Explosion of data being collected in our smart cities. Not a lot of predictions around cyber 9/11s or cyber Pearl Harbors. Dire predictions like everything is going to go down and the internet's going to be down for a month. But there's always some of those out there, and thankfully we did not have any incidents like those in 2019, although we did have quite a few major incidents we'll discuss. Some disagreements we're heading into 19, and I think some of these still flow into 2020. Disagreements around, will artificial intelligence really change the game in cyber? Are the biggest threats in the cloud? Are they in mobile? Are they in critical infrastructure? Which sectors will be hardest hit? A lot of people said, is it hospitals' turn? Certainly hospitals were hit hard in 2019, certainly in the USA, around the world, in the UK, and in Europe as well. A lot of, in the US especially, state and local government ransomware attacks probably took the cake in 2019. And then really even, more forecast trends, predictions as the cyber industry as a whole and the market as a whole just exploded. And then really kind of what we're going to focus on this morning is 2020 predictions. And I'm going to go through a couple of our top industry predictions. And by the way, if you want to read more about some of these, you can go to govtech.com. That's www.govtech.com. Go to Lorman on Cybersecurity, and there's a full report on the top prediction reports from all the top vendors, kind of ranked from 1 to 20, really laying out not just kind of guesses, but really a lot of really good research that went into these reports. And as I mentioned, 2019 was the year where ransomware really targeted state and local governments. And I'm going to ask, stop here in a moment and ask Adam and Vinod to talk about that. But certainly some trends as we head into 2020. A lot of more themes around ransomware and the need for defending against ransomware. Everyone's saying more huge data breaches. Bad actors still way out in front. Still a lot of discussion around cloud, mobile, AI, drones, IoT, autonomous vehicles. Many predict the criminals will be ahead in the new technology, so actually using AI and other tools more than the defenders will. And that really we're in a cyber arms race, that a cyber cold war has already begun, and we're really in the midst of that right now. So as we head into 2020, I want to start off with one, and then I want to really kind of turn over to Adam and get his view on this. But as we look at Trend Micro, and like I said, the reason I highlight these three vendors is certainly not any kind of commercial message for anyone. They have really outstanding reports. I encourage you to go visit the full reports from these vendors and read in detail why they made these predictions. Literally hundreds of thousands of dollars and millions of dollars being put into making these research predictions. But the highlights were attackers will outpace incomplete and hurried patches. Cyber criminals will turn to blockchain platforms for their transaction in the background. Banking systems will be in the crosshairs with open banking and ATM malware, and a lot of focus on deepfakes. Deepfakes will be the next frontier for enterprise fraud, faking people's voices, faking their images, emails, making it really look like your boss is telling you to do something, and it's not really your boss. So it's coming from somebody else or a business partner. You think it's coming from business partner. People infiltrating networks, and actually it's really deep fakes. It's not really them. So making sure the processes, procedures, the people, process, technology are in place to ensure that you're defending against deep fakes. Some misconfigured here. Exposed cyber criminals will hone in on IoT devices and homes, espionage, extortion. Infrastructure will be plagued by more attacks. By the way, we already saw in the early days of, we'll talk about this, the early days of 2020, more ransomware attacks, more attacks against, just a couple days ago, U.S. natural gas operator was shut down by ransomware. So a lot of that is already happening. So let me just stop there. And Adam, this Trend Micro list and the things I've already mentioned, coming in to the predictions you're seeing here on the list for 2020. What are your thoughts in general about what these companies are predicting will be facing us in 2020?
Yeah, no, I think a lot of these are really spot on. I think, you highlighted deep fakes. There's so much that we're dealing with public trust at this point. I think that deep fakes are definitely going to be, at the very least, a big problem with regards to increasing the effectiveness of things like phishing, as like voice phishing. And I think it really does strike at eroding the trust that it's our responsibility to protect. It'll dealing with that is going to require us organizationally, globally in many organizations, to make sure that we establish more structured communication procedures. We aren't always going to be able to trust the human elements that we can trust. We may be able to look at an email header or a sender and realize that that's not real. It's going to be an entirely different thing when it's a video or a phone call that's fooling our human senses. I think the ransomware stuff is absolutely going to continue, and I think all of these predictions are going to talk about that, simply because it's been so effective. We definitely see, when you mention natural gas, it's not even a traditional attack vector. It's just such a hugely effective tool. And we're definitely seeing that, within the state of Illinois and dealing with that on a pretty regular basis.
Great, thanks. Hey, Vinod, three of the things that I didn't mention a moment ago, misconfigured areas to worry about. One of them is vulnerabilities in container components will be top security concerns for DevOps teams. Serverless platforms will introduce an attack surface for misconfiguration and vulnerable codes, and user misconfigurations and unsecured third-party involvement will compound risk in cloud platforms. A lot of discussion around cloud vulnerabilities, or you may have, people say, well, I'm using Amazon, or I'm using Google, or I'm using Microsoft, I'm using these great cloud platforms or other really good cloud platforms, but they can be misconfigured. Any thoughts on that, or any of these other predictions that Trend Micro highlights?
Absolutely, I'll take that one. That these predictions, especially around these vulnerabilities that you just highlighted as well from this report, Dan, if we see what is happening, let's try to bridge some of the things that even Adam touched, and then I'll go into this specific aspect as well. So when we look at all these trends, what it is giving us an indication is what we have for a while considered normal is what is being specifically targeted by attackers to say human mind is completely conditioned to go through day in and day out through a certain process and taking things a certain way, taking things granted. So let's exploit that certain behavior and use that as an attack vector. And that's how some of these trends are indicating. Now let's talk about vulnerabilities. What we see a lot happening in our sector right now is people think that you are going to fix a problem in a tool with a tool. And we sometimes think, okay, I have all these tools that have problems, and I'm going to bring this nice new tool. It looks great and shiny, and it's going to really, really take care. But every tool has a problem. Tools have holes. Tools have vulnerabilities. So really, it emphasizes at such a deep level, and that's exactly why that's high on the list for Washington State as well, to really get our vulnerabilities under control, have great visibility, look at what it is that we are using. Same thing again, the very same thought is going on for cloud as well. Cloud has been, for a while, looked at as the panacea for all problems. Oh, I'm using a cloud solution, so I shouldn't have to worry about this. This is hosted with Amazon, so I'm sure it's done. It's great. It's a fantastic job. So that I shouldn't have to worry about this. It's not. So we really, again, as Adam touched as well, we have to hone in on the business processes, right? What are we doing? What exactly is this specific solution? What is the business purpose it is solving? And try to really go through the life cycle to see what things can go wrong. Where do we have responsibilities? Where do we have to specifically look for responsibility, even from a cloud provider, to see what they're doing? Those areas, it's very, very getting very critical, because we just cannot say, I'm okay with this. Everything else that's on the other side is going to be taken care of somebody else, and it's going to be okay on the other side too. No, we can't. So that's what I see with this specific element about this vulnerabilities and how people are perceiving these cloud solutions. So.
Great, thank you so much for that. I'm going to go through two more vendors and then get some more feedback from Adam and Vinod. I want to just mention FireEye. These are, again, top reports. You can download the entire report. Encourage you to do that. You see the link there where you can go and get the report for free with a registration. But really, FireEye focused on how organizations and vendors need to start thinking about security, the emerging role of the general counsel, continued evolution of information operations, geopolitics as a driver of cyber activity, and increasing sophistication of cyber criminal operations. Specifically, I like this quote: proof of compliance. In 2020, there will be a broadening push on providers to offer more proof of compliance to industry regulations and customer requirements, with clear ways for their customers to validate that vendors are doing what they say they are doing. And then also ransomware evolving. You see that ransomware tactics evolving in 2020. Defenders need to be looking out for new techniques involving ransomware. What we've been seeing in the underground is threat actors advertising their access to organizations, no matter what industry, trying to find partners who have ransomware that they can deploy deep in those networks in a very customized fashion. So FireEye, keep that in mind. Maybe Adam and Vinod, I'm going to just do one more. WatchGuard. Again, they always have a fantastic set of reports. You can go out, you can watch their videos, you can read their reports. Great link there at WatchGuard. But talking about ransomware targeting the cloud, GDPR comes to the USA. We're talking about that in the California privacy legislation that came into effect January 1st. A lot of focus on voter registration systems, a lot of focus on elections, obviously after what happened in 2016, but databases and targeting. And again, it was interesting. I found in Iowa, I did a whole piece on that. They focused on security, and they had a problem with their mobile app, and that in turn, even though it was not necessarily security related, it appeared that it was. It appears that it was a mobile app problem. That has led to a nationwide further fear about security, which is it's interesting how it kind of goes round and round in a circle there. But the cybersecurity skills gap widen. 2020, 25% of all breaches will happen outside the perimeter, which is interesting. Attackers will find new vulnerabilities in 5G and Wi-Fi, and then multi-factor authentication will become a standard for mid-sized companies. But that's a good prediction. I hope that does happen. So, Adam, back to you. Either WatchGuard or FireEye, any of those two you want to kind of zoom in on and comment?
Yeah, I think one of them, like specifically on FireEye, one of the things we didn't really hit, but that was on that slide, was about the pivot to private accounts. And so that's something, and it has a direct adjacency to elections. It's something that we've been very involved in here in Illinois, talking with elections authorities, and I know that we have it with our own employees, and it's the same with employees of major corporations or any corporation that makes money and can be extorted. There is a need for us to evangelize exactly what FireEye mentioned there, which is that Sometimes our surface area, we work very hard in our professional organizations to protect the surface area there, reduce the surface area there, and have visibility. Our employees, though, can be victimized with their private accounts. The use of things like VPN make that an option to pivot, or if we spend a lot of time filtering email and looking for things like that. But if employees are allowed to get to their private email at work, they don't have that same level of protection. Sometimes I think corporate cyber efforts can make people a little comfortable, and they may not consider that they might be victimized through their private channels as well. That's something very much we're, like I said, having those conversations with elections authorities statewide here, because if you're interesting enough, then malicious actors will be willing to target you, not just in your professional capacity, but try to get to you through your private capacity as well. Yeah, I think the thing here on WatchGuard, like, I agree with you. MFA, with as effective as phishing has already been and continues to be, and as tailored as it is, in some ways we seem to be reaching a point where user security awareness training, it's never going to be 100% effective at training people to stop clicking. And when we do see email or account compromise through people clicking on links, giving up their credentials, it's almost instantaneous that attackers log back into portals and then resend messages as internal. So I think that's a promising trend. I think it's going to almost be, mandatory to survive.
Yeah, great points. I especially agree. A lot of the business email compromise, and people call it whaling now, is the biggest ones in private world. I'm sure we're going to start seeing it in the public sector as well. Is going after those big fish, going after the CEOs, and not necessarily going after their corporate accounts, going after their Gmail accounts, going after those private accounts, and using that as a way to get in, to their administrative assistants, to their processes at work. And I think that's a great point. I think that's going to happen even more. Vinod, comments on any of those from WatchGuard or FireEye or anything else on the list that we saw here?
I agree with what Adam just shared, and same things what you said as well. I absolutely concur. We are, so the same examples, what we are also seeing, Dan, is not just at folks at the CEO levels. There has also been a trend targeting HR directors as well, along how to redirect the payroll information, and how some of these how some of those accounts are also targeted for again specific financial gain. So I agree. I don't know if I have anything more to add, but I think the points that Adam made was fantastic, and I fully agree on that one. Yes.
Great, thanks. Well, let's keep moving. We give our CISOs a chance to talk about their specific projects for this year. So every year I kind of summarize. Actually looked at over about 180 different reports, thousands of predictions. These were kind of what I call the prediction awards, but I'll just mention a few of these. Not going to read them all. Basically, Trend Micro having the top report overall, but really, Bug Crowd, I like this one. The unknown is the biggest cyber threat businesses will face. So we're always going to have unknown, and humble and hungry is what I always say. But we got to be ready, because the bad guys are always trying new things. They're always trying new attacks. Deepfakes as a service emerges. ForcePoint used that. False flag attacks reach a whole new level. This will develop further with threat actors seeking not only to avoid attribution, but also to actively lay the blame on somebody else. Commodity malware, scripts, publicly available security tools, or administrative software mixed with a couple of false flags where security researchers are hungry for any small clue might be enough to divert authorship to someone else. That was from Kaspersky. Real ID will cause real chaos. This is going to be I'm just going to do a whole nother webinar just on this one, because I just traveled through airports recently. I travel quite a bit, and everywhere I go, it's like, Michigan here, you got to have that real ID card to fly. October 1, that takes effect across the country. I think a lot of people, those driver's licenses are changing, and that whole real ID action for the states is going to be huge. Individual protections that are most scary. Hackers will find new low-hanging fruit in the cloud. We talked about that. That's from Splunk. More targeted ransomware. Deepfakes cause myriad of problems with various election hacks. Misinformation campaigns will emerge during the elections. Almost every company talked about the election. topic of most disagreement among security vendors. Again, back to cloud versus mobile versus other things. Some people say cloud, some people say mobile. A lot of times I encourage people to look at who's authoring the report. Are they a cloud company? Are they a mobile company? Obviously, that might be part of that. And then we are all targets. If you work with a high value target, you are a high value target. That's some FireEye. So I still hear, amazingly enough, how many companies, small companies, businesses, small governments, oh, they don't care about me, we're not going to get hit. And that's getting smaller and smaller, but I still hear that a few times a year still, even as we move forward. Well, at this point, I just want to hand it off. I want to give Adam Ford 7 to 10 minutes here, talk about the top projects they're seeing for 2020 in the state of Illinois. So, Adam, here's your list. Take it away.
Sure, thank you. So in Illinois, we've had a cybersecurity strategy now for about 3 years that we developed, and so we tend to talk towards these high business focused goals, protecting the state of Illinois information and systems, reducing cyber risk, increasing our cybersecurity capabilities, taking an enterprise approach, and then we have what we call a Cybersecurity Illinois. And what these are all representative of, our approach in Illinois is, I work for an agency called the Department of Innovation and Technology. We were recently created. We've existed about 16 months now. We were signed into law in July of 2018, and basically in our state, that was a consolidation of IT functions from 63 different agencies that were under our Office of the Governor. Obviously, that's not a greenfield kind of an organization. So a lot of our efforts over the last couple of years have been getting visibility, kind of moving towards standardization of our tools and our processes. Processes are obviously very important. I mentioned that earlier. Coming from the tool side, it's amazing how absolutely critical, or it was amazing to me to understand how absolutely critical making sure that those processes are there. I think, coming as a technologist, it's very easy to lose sight of the human aspect of things and how important that is. So that's been a big area of focus with us in Illinois. We, like everyone else, we talk about reducing cyber risk. We're really talking about reducing surface area the same as everyone else through things like advanced authentication, and patching, and the same stuff that everyone is doing. On our Cybersecurity Illinois, as usually what I talk the most about, we, like other states, I know I listened to last year's episode, and I know North Carolina, Maria is doing a lot of the same stuff. We are increasingly involved at the state level in assisting our local and municipal governments, our counties and cities in the state, to help them deal with these cybersecurity issues. So a large part of our mission with them is not just to provide technology assistance and technology services, but it's to evangelize the need for some of those things that we probably take for granted in the cybersecurity industry, like executive sponsorship. So a lot of my time and my team's time is spent not just talking to IT coordinators at cities, but trying to talk to leadership at counties or cities and make sure that the senior executives have that buy-in and that sponsorship. Dan mentioned it a little bit there at the end, that people really, I think there's still a strong belief amongst people that they're too small to be attacked, or they're not noticed. And I think that approach, while understandable, does mean that people might feel like they don't necessarily have to focus as much on cyber hygiene. It's very easy if you're the mayor of a city or the board president of a county, you've got a ton of different demands coming at you at the same time. And it can be easy to think of cybersecurity as just another IT thing, just like switching from one version of Windows to the other. That is in fact part of it. But if we don't evangelize and build out that executive sponsorship of the cybersecurity hygienic practices, which are, as everyone on this call knows, a lot of repetition of the same thing over and over again. You don't just put patches on once a year, you do them monthly, weekly. the same thing with staffing or spending money on a managed security provider to monitor your logs and to make sure that you have an incident response plan in place. We found that approach in our state has opened a few doors for us in terms of being invited in to talk with locals, and then from there we do, we're trying to raise all boats in the state of Illinois. We really evangelize the use of frameworks for building out security programs at the local level and at the county level. We always recommend the CIS controls for our locals because we find them a lot more approachable for small counties. If there's only 10 things that you have to do and you have an IT staff member for 20 hours a week, at least it gets them started down a direction. We really evangelize to them the value of risk assessments and having a plan for how you're going to get in alignment with the framework. We, like other states, are busy also responding to incidents when asked. In Illinois, we have a lot of units of local government, so there are a lot of different organizations to do outreach to. We're not like some states like North Dakota where everything is kind of centrally orchestrated. That's not the case here in the state of Illinois. So in general, I mean, kind of hit a high level of what we're doing. The biggest thing is trying to evangelize that systemic approach and trying to help our smaller partners know where to start. I think the answer always, and we try to make sure and inform this when I talk to people as well, that the place to start on any cybersecurity program is wherever you are, because it doesn't matter where you want to be, it matters where you are, and then you start walking towards where you want to be. So it's kind of the highlight of Illinois this year.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. Before we go to Vedant, just one quick follow-up. I'm looking at an article here that just came out last Friday in Massachusetts. This is NBC Boston. You can go to nbcboston.com, and it's out there as a lead story on cybersecurity. 1 in 6 Massachusetts communities hit by ransomware attacks last year, which is a huge number when you think about that. And they have maps of who all was hit. And they said at least 10 communities handed over taxpayer money to hackers, paying Bitcoin as encrypted digital currency. One case, the city didn't have enough money to do it, so a guy had to take the money out of his personal bank account. Transfer $4,600 from his personal bank account to pay. I'm not going to ask you any specifics, Adam, about Illinois, but I mean, are you guys seeing ransomware in Illinois as well? Is this a nationwide trend that small governments? I'm just in general. I'm not asking for any specifics, but yeah. I mean, I know, it's something you're seeing? I mean, because I'm hearing this all over the country.
Yeah, I mean, I think the cocktail of Emotet and then TrickBot and then Ryuk, we're seeing that as much in Illinois as any other state. And yeah, I think you highlight a really good point there, and it's something that I think we're trying to grapple in Illinois, and I know other states are trying to grapple, is how do we start to scope the problem? How do we understand where it is? I would guess that the reporting that's a lot, 50%. That's a lot in Boston, but my guess would be there's some degree of underreporting unless Massachusetts has a mandatory reporting rule on ransomware. Because I think we see that in our own, in our own state. We've done a lot of outreach with elections, so we have really good connections to counties. So we often hear from counties. We don't necessarily hear from some of the other units of government. So it's not uncommon for us to hear about something in the newspaper exactly like this. I think nationally, and I'm sure globally, I think there's going to be a lot of value the more that we're able to get reporting and understand how really widespread the problem is. But yeah, we absolutely are seeing it. It's a nationwide scourge. So.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate that. Well, let's go over to Washington State and talk about their cyber projects. Vinod, take it away.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dan. So I think I'm going to pivot from some of the key points that Adam stated, and I think we're all doing the same thing in cyberspace across the country in a way, trying to really help all of us to figure out where are you, right? That's the key question. So I'll talk about what we are doing in the state of Washington, especially since I'm fairly new on board, so I'm trying to certainly use that as well to focus on the basics, to bring the attention back to the basics. One of my key areas that I'm focusing on, and again, socializing a lot of discussions around, is on governance. If we see one great thing about what we all can do, especially from the point of 2020 predictions, what we saw for 2090 predictions, certainly we can use the elements of these type of attacks to help us figure out, okay, where are we? If we try to deconstruct these attacks and say, if we want to position ourselves to not have some of these, what exactly do we need to do? What are the policies? What policies do we need in order to really, really help us have a culture of security? So the focus that I'm really, really promoting out in Washington as well is, how do we change the discussions away from compliance and bring it back to security? We get so many times we just start talking things from a compliance perspective. I have to do this from compliance. We need to do this from a compliance. The focus has to be on security. How do we protect the integrity, the confidentiality of our business? And again, doing things that are more relevant for the business. So the first one, again, as I just want to emphasize, for me, the high focus is on how do we influence policies that can help us position for the future? How can it really help us really receive the type of support that we need? Because the attacks, the threats, everything that we see today, obviously people in the industry are going to say, what you see today, it's going to be the lowest in history because everything else is going to keep increasing tomorrow. So today being the lowest, we know things are going to go up. How do we do? How do we plan for the future? What are the policies that we need? How do we ensure support? So that's high on my list right now, to focus on policies, especially to look at the element from the people aspect. I think if we get things right with people, the other things will come together very well. So how are we looking at our talent? What is the type of talent that we need? How do we develop the talent? Again, keeping in mind that it should not be based on what we know from yesterday. It has to be based on how do we want to be strong tomorrow. So that's high on our list. That's where we are focusing in Washington, number one. And I'll now again quickly go in for the second one that I touched early on as well. We need to do a better job managing our vulnerabilities. I think many times when we see, especially in a large organization, if you are a large state as well, and if you are a very federated state, you're going to see you have lots and lots of tools in your environment. Do we know exactly how we are managing all vulnerabilities in those tools? We have to have the right level of visibility. We absolutely want to extend our capabilities on how we manage vulnerabilities. How do we really emphasize the need for updating patches on time? Because as we all know, yes, we are seeing all these attacks, we are seeing all these predictions, but what has been common year after year, when we look at the Verizon Data Breach Investigations Report, a trend that has been there for a long time is that about 70% of the breaches could have been prevented with some very simple, by doing the basics right, by doing patches correct, having the right amount of patch management process. So taking all of this is exactly how we have a very, very, very rigorous program that we want to put in for improving our vulnerability management. So that's an area of focus for us as well. And last, again, I want to focus again on elements from bringing the conversation back to the business. If we see again, going back to the example that I just said a minute ago, many times we just get buried on discussions around compliance. And also when we look at vulnerabilities as well, we also get overwhelmed many times. Okay, we see all these vulnerabilities, but what do we do after that, right? How do we prioritize? How do we allocate resources from the perspective of what is the first thing that I have to get to? Because we need to have that knowledge, we need to have that level of technologies in place. So how do we how do we manage risk? Because the focus has to be again it's all about risk, right? So how do we manage risk from the context of the business? What do some vulnerabilities, what do some threats mean in the context of business. That's where the focus has to be. That way we are focusing on things that is right for the business and not getting overwhelmed from maybe an attack that just happened in a neighboring town or a neighboring state. So the focus again is that we are spending quite a good amount of time to help every agency. We have some very good processes and technologies that we are evaluating on how do we correlate information from all these different sources, knowing what vulnerabilities are, and funneling that into a process to help us clearly identify, either mapping it across the CVE, the CVSS scores to say, okay, yes, there is a trend. Now, especially even from that trend, what are some specific vulnerabilities that are being targeted by the threat actors, even for ransomwares? So really giving business that level of information to help them look at the vulnerabilities so they can effectively prioritize. That's a key area of focus, what we're working on as well. And but again, last, but I'm not saying it's certainly not the least. I want to emphasize to everyone, we are more challenged and we have to focus a lot more on education than what we did yesterday. There is a high need, as Adam was saying too. We have to bring the focus to say, what are we doing right? What are we doing wrong? How do we evangelize? How do we extend the support? How do we ensure that there are more people who are speaking the language of security? They don't have to be security experts. They don't have to be IT experts, but say that we all have to bring or promote a culture that puts security first, because certainly we are seeing that not having that thought is what has certainly caused us to be where we are today, where we have so many struggles. We have to educate our staff. We have to educate leaders. We have to educate people in all levels of the organization, where people know what are the elements that I have to keep in my mind. What are the processes that I have to keep in my mind that I just go, so that I'm not going with the flow. I'm not going to start clicking on things. This is what I'm not supposed to do. What are the areas that people can exploit my behavior to use that as an attack vector? So there are things that we can all bring the conversation from an education standpoint, where especially I like to focus on some training tools that are very much awareness and training tools that are more that give you the flexibility to tailor messages for specific audiences. Because for a while we have done some mistakes where we have done the aspect of trying to use it more as a checklist. Okay, here is my standard training. I want everybody to go through these 20 different things and I have done it. No, we have to bring it again, really tailor the message in a way that can resonate with the audience so they can really absorb what it is that we all have to be mindful about. So I can't speak enough. I can always speak for hours on the importance of education, because I absolutely feel that's very critical. And I think touching on the other item I have there, which I briefly spoke about as well, the security champions. We don't have enough people, and you need people who can advocate for security support. And what we are seeing in organizations is, when it comes to security, it's literally the voice and the need is coming from a small group of people. We need to extend that. So something I came across from a conference, I heard that quite a few organizations are doing that, the Security Champions program. I think, how do you really start identifying the evangelists at every organization has many evangelists that we can tap into, who can help permeate the security message, who can really help extend the support. And I think really it's a beautiful program. I highly encourage a lot of folks to look into it. I think that can really help even the executives hear the need for security from a lot more people than how the trend is, where the message comes from a small group of folks. And I think that would also extend the support, even financial support that you can get from the executives to really help extend the goals of security programs. So that's where our focus is in Washington right now, in addition to, of course, a lot more things what we have to do, keeping the lights on, and certainly, yes, other things that I may not want to say in a very public forum. So yes.
Great. Well, thank you, Vinod. That's really helpful. Thank you very much for that. We want to turn a bit. And by the way, for anyone online, we encourage you to put your questions in. We're going to take questions in a few minutes, talk about privacy. We're going to have a little message from PECB, and then we're going to take some questions. So I encourage you to go ahead and put your questions into the system. As you're online, go ahead and type your questions in, and we'll get to those. I want to turn to the CCPA, Privacy in the California Consumer Privacy Act, which took effect. Obviously, we're talking about Illinois and Washington State here. Start with Illinois and you, Adam. I mean, interestingly enough, this is so many things we could say about this. We could do a whole hour just on this. But companies that do business with California partners, lots of different ways this plays. And then I don't know. Does Illinois have? I know Washington State. We'll talk about that in a minute. Has a privacy bill that's very close to being a law. But does Illinois have their own privacy laws, or how do you think about CCPA, Adam?
Yeah, I think CCPA, in a lot of ways, obviously at the state level, it doesn't directly affect us. I know a lot of we have a lot of businesses that operate out of the state of Illinois and are bound by CCPA. I think the GDPR efforts are going to help them because I don't think that there are some differences in CCPA extension on some of the privacy aspects or some of the entities that are allowed. Once the rules are finalized, I think we'll see more. But I think the lift is going to be a lot lower for them to implement CCPA requirements because they've already been through the GDPR process. In terms of privacy, we've had a Personal Information Protection Act in Illinois for quite a while. We call it PIPA, Personal Information Protection Act, and Illinois is one of the our statute, as I've been made aware, is one of the most or was historically one of the most restrictive with regards to biometric information about citizens. So every now and then you'll hear a national press article about something here with related to Touch ID or something like that. We don't currently. There are a few bills, before the legislature in the spring session related to privacy. I think that, stateside, I expect CCPA to kick off a series of other bills, and we're seeing that. Like as you mentioned in Washington last year, there was a lot of talk about a bill that didn't go in New York State. So I think we will see more privacy stuff happen at the state level going around. I wouldn't totally be surprised to see it in Illinois, although I don't know that it'll happen this year. We did pass in Illinois, we have a new Student Online Personal Protection Act that passed last year of 2019. That goes into effect next year, about a year and a half from now. So it has delayed implementation, and that provides specific requirements to schools. All of the statutes are trying to tackle privacy with regards to the data that's being collected about us and how it's being protected. And specifically, I know our own Student Online Personal Protection Act tries to address some of the things related to breach or dissemination upstream. So schools themselves having policies, and then additionally, their providers having policies. I think, I don't think the dust is settled on this. And in Illinois, like I said, we have the existing bill. It doesn't nearly go as far as CCPA with regards to the online component, the tracking of the data that people have on citizens. I do think that that'll continue to grow. And I'm kind of watching, the whole thing on privacy, I think, is really interesting because it's very hard. CCPA, GDPR, there's been a lot of efforts to implement the privacy controls, which I applaud and I'm a huge fan of. I think sometimes I don't think we've yet found the magic concoction that will protect how our data is used against us, maybe, or to take like the opposite side of things. I think that CCPA goes really far in terms of ensuring that people can see their data and know when their data is sold. I think that's excellent. I think it's going to have some big impacts. But as far as direct impact on the state of Illinois, I think we're going to wait and see what our response is to CCPA.
Great, thanks. Well, Vinod, in Washington, you've got the Washington Privacy Act. It looks like in January it's getting close to passing. You also have CCPA. What are your thoughts on this?
Uh, I I know that, yes. Number one, I think I need to collect more information on the specific details of our Privacy Act. I didn't get a chance to do a deep dive, Dan. I do know that there is certainly where our focus is as well to really put some definitions around what is and what cannot biometrics be used for. I know that's where some of the bills are. Unfortunately, I missed having that conversation with our chief privacy officer, so I don't have some strong insight that I can provide on this topic, but I would be happy to get some more details, and maybe after this webinar, I can send something that can be posted to our audiences.
Great. Well, thank you. I really appreciate that.
Yep.
Yeah, good. So I want to keep moving here, and I want to hand it back to PECB. They're going to tell us about some of the courses they offer, and then we're going to come back in a few moments and take your questions. So keep those questions coming, put them in. I see a couple questions have been sent. Go ahead and take it away, the PECB.
Thank you, Dan, Adam, and Vinod for delivering this very informative presentation. I would like to inform you that PCB provides training and certification services for ISO 27032 Introduction, Foundation, and Lead Cybersecurity Manager. A PCB certificate will convey your dedication in implementing and managing these processes and frameworks, and most importantly, you will be recognized worldwide. I would also like to inform you about the PCB store that has officially launched in October 2019. We invite you to take a look at this e-commerce platform and its products by clicking the link that I sent you in the chat box. Some of the products that you will find available on the PCB store are ISO standards, which are sold at a very convenient price. Now we will go ahead and take some time to answer some of the questions from the attendees regarding today's topic. The first question.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yeah. The first question is, what are the major vulnerabilities that can affect the cloud infrastructure from the security and governance perspective, considering most of the organization globally place their data on the cloud?
Adam, do you want to start with that one?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of big ones that we deal with and that we struggle with. First and foremost, I think that anytime we're dealing with any cloud that's delivered as IaaS or even some of the PaaS stuff, the news about accidental disclosure breaches from improperly secured S3 buckets or blob storage are frequent. I think a lot of the challenge is, how do you monitor for that? Specifically, given the security tool set, we just don't have the same level of visibility into cloud configuration stuff. We haven't got there, and I think that organizations that traditionally operated in a brick and mortar data center environment had some degree of security could be outsourced somewhat from the developers and the implementers because there was a separate group managing and maintaining firewalls. As we go to cloud, there's huge security benefits to going to cloud, but it also means everyone has to be diligent. Settings have to be set correctly, and that seems to be one of the bigger areas. It's not that the cloud is insecure; it's that it's been improperly implemented, and that's very hard to detect if we don't have the same levels of visibility into the systems. And then at the same time, pivoting that out, the new nature of software as a service and of our engagement at the state and at corporate level with other companies, there is a strong possibility. We have to rely on one another. It's really any company that has perhaps some lax security practices with regards to their cloud instances can be used as a pivot point in. And while we absolutely, like everyone else, look at SOC 2 reports and we trust a lot in terms of the auditing process of those things, we don't have the same capabilities to do this, like the vuln scan, really to kick the tires and look at the engine of some of these cloud instances that we have. We really have to rely on information systems auditors to provide that level of compliance. So I think that those are really the biggest areas. It's just a lack of full transparency and visibility into exactly what everything looks like.
Yeah, and Vinod, I mean, I think as we think about this topic of the cloud, I know FedRAMP is the federal program, Fed, FEDRAMP, FedRAMP. A lot of federal systems have to require FedRAMP certification. Is that something you're seeing in Washington, or how do you guys address this cloud? I mean, how do you attack the cloud security question?
It is a very challenging question, Dan. I think again going back to some of the things that we discussed early on to correct. So we have to really start looking at our environment to say, okay, now if this is a SaaS application, and I know you touched the term POC, like vendors requiring like proof of compliance in a way. What we are seeing in, because we are a cloud first state as well, we have a lot of cloud-based implementations, and yes, I think because we are losing the opportunity for the level of visibility that we need, especially from even from a monitoring perspective, how do we really ensure continuous monitoring of our entire ecosystem? Some of these capabilities we are not able to fully implement for cloud solutions. So one, I think we are also, like, there is efforts underway to really start looking at what should a cloud strategy look like. How do we, number one, we also have an initiative, we have our cloud highway that we have created for onboarding all new cloud, for onboarding cloud solutions that go in from our network into a cloud. But that's more, along the transport, on the transport layer aspect of it, to see how do we ensure security from that angle. But once there is a full cloud-based solution that is implemented, the east-west movement, if there is an attack in the ecosystem, it's a challenge. We are not able to see that. So I don't believe I'm giving the full answer, because it is I'm seeing that to be a challenge. I think we need to put a little bit more effort on to see how we can really tackle this challenge going forward.
Great. Well, thank you. I think we're ready for the next question. I know a number of states are. I just want to add one quick thing, and that is a number of states are going to cloud access security brokers, which obviously don't fully solve the problem, and there's actually next generation brokers. But bottom line is, looking at those configurations with programs like FedRAMP, I know a lot of states are doing that. So, okay, go ahead. And maybe one more question. We've got about 3 minutes left, so maybe time for one more question.
Yes, thank you. The second question is, would you view responding to security issues from a state perspective different to the way an organization would view and approach it?
Adam, take that. State perspective different than a project. Maybe they mean also different from the private sector, but go ahead.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think the response is similar in terms of the fact that you're not on your own timeline. Absolutely. At the state level, we have less resources in some ways, and in other ways we have more resources than you have in the private sector. Within the government space, incident response requires, in all cases, a lot of planning ahead of time, a lot of collaboration during the incident, and clear lines of command and control during the incident. In the public sector, especially if we cross government lines, when we deal with local governments and county governments, that can be, that water can get muddied. And I'm just taking it this way. I hope this is appropriate in terms of the question, but responding to something like an EMITET or a trick bot, sometimes when you've got experience in those environments, and this is one of the learning things I think we deal with at the local level, sometimes the first step in responding to a major cybersecurity incident is walking in and realizing that, like, you're not rescuing anything. You're going to move quickly into contain and recover. And I think especially for our smaller partners, getting to that realization, and that sometimes it's not worth continuing to fight and scrap forward, and that it's time to contain and rebuild. That can be a challenge for people to come up to. I think in the private sector, you don't have that same thing, because you have a more linear line of command within private sector.
Yeah, got it. That sounds great. I know we're out of time, but Vinod, I'd love to hear your response to this as well. But unfortunately, We're right at the 10 o'clock hour here. So I just want to say thank you to everyone for listening in. This will be available on demand as well. Our contact information is on this last page here. I think they swapped Vinod and I's LinkedIn profiles there, but you can see our email addresses and our LinkedIn basically profiles. You can go and learn more about us. And I especially want to thank Adam and Vinod. Great job, just fantastic CISOs, great leaders, and thank you for your public service. And I'll turn it back and say have a great day, and we're glad you joined us.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. This was great.
Yep, thank you.
So long.
Thank you all again for this outstanding and interactive presentation, and thank you everyone for attending today's webinar. Please be informed that this session will be recorded and posted on our website and YouTube channel, along with the slides of the presentation. For more information, visit our website. Thank you again and have a great day.